Hi everybody, it's Ricky here again, and I'm with my friend Dolores, who I have known for a very long time as an acquaintance. I would say we are internet acquaintances, but we have met in person. Um, do you remember where we met?
Okay, so I'm pretty sure we met because you were touring and needed a place to crash.
You are absolutely right. That
Yeah.
is where we met. Yeah, I was in a band playing Richmond, and a literal lifetime ago, right?
Yeah, seriously.
Um, so yeah, and we became Facebook friends. You were very generous. You gave us a place to stay, and I think you ordered us Domino's pizza, um, which we were a
Oh
touring
yeah.
band. So I greatly appreciated that. And you let three strangers crash at your apartment, and we were very appreciative of that. And then from there, I've gotten to know you remotely, right, through your journeys. But part of the reason I wanted to talk to you is you've been very helpful to me in understanding a lot of radical thought, what feminism is, like what like intersectional feminism is about, gender identity, and I mean a lot about empathy. And so I just kind of wanted to, sometimes we create luminaries out of people, but I just kind of wanted to let the people know who you are because you've been very important for me, even just as an internet acquaintance. So kind of.
Aw, that's so
uh,
sweet. Wow.
well, yeah, no, it's good, right? That's the power of the internet, right? The good power,
Mhm.
not the bad power. So kind of, Dolores, what was kind of your journey to radicalism like? Like, how did you find yourself on a path to um being more of a radical thinker?
So I let's see. I feel like where do I even start? Like I
Sure.
grew up in a household where my Cuban dad is very like anti-American. Um, my mom's like less political, but she's Catalan, which has like a rich political history. Um, and my dad, I would grow up with my dad being like, um, just like saying fuck the government a lot. And like anytime we, like as a
Yeah.
child, like anytime we drove by cops, he'd be like, fuck the pigs.
Yeah.
Um, so I feel like I attribute a lot of, even though at the time I was like, this is so embarrassing, please stop. Like, um, I feel like growing up with that influence definitely helped. And like growing up off like punk music. Um,
Yeah,
although
that's how
I
we
have some
met.
feelings about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. I think that's probably like the basis of it.
So, you know, I guess building off of that, right? So your parents laid that foundation. Where do you feel like? Because I can tell you I have become more radical in the time we've known each other, but I have seen you becoming more and more radical. And I guess let's take a step back because I think radical is a scary word to a lot of people, right? Like this
Mhm.
idea that being radical is like you're an extremist or a terrorist, like that gets conflated a lot, right? The idea that,
Yeah.
but
Especially for people like facing charges. Like
yeah,
you heard the people in Cop City in Atlanta that are all getting domestic terrorist charges for
yeah,
protesting.
yeah, for protesting, right? Like the idea of I think we in 2020, right, with the world we were in and still are in, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people really started to get confronted with radicalism, and I think we had an organizing movement. And one of the things I've seen, I think in the last few years, I've been talking with some of my friends about. Maybe you have some opinions on this. I feel like we started to get some real organizing power when everybody was stuck at home, and then
Oh, interesting.
and
Hmm.
now that we're back at work, they have ramped this up to like crush this organizing, this people supporting each other. But if you were to say, if I were to ask you what is radicalism, what would you say that is? Like the idea of being a radical thinker.
Hmm. I would say being a radical thinker is based in community self-determination.
Yeah.
So like being grounded in a liberation for everyone, but
All
like that has a core in like feeling empowered, um, and within a community of people.
and so definitely I would agree with that. I think, what do you think the biggest misconceptions about being a radical are, or about being like a people focused?
Yeah.
Is honestly what I would call it, is just being people focused.
Really, truly.
Yeah,
Um,
genuinely, not like corporate buzzword people focused, but actual, right?
right, right,
Well,
right.
what would you say the biggest misconceptions are?
Um, I feel like the context in the United States is that because we see our political spectrum pushing towards the right, anything that is really like center left is feels extreme, where like again, I'm grateful to have like cultural, excuse me, cultural contexts where um it's more left, there's more of a left focus. So it seems like less scary, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah,
But I think for a lot of Americans, it's like, we saw, I was a kid during the Bush era, but like we saw the GOP like come into power, and like how the right Tea Party formed,
yeah,
um, was really extreme for that time. But now it seems like the normal,
yeah, yeah. Oh, I agree. I think I mean, even just the idea of like a President Trump, the things that he was saying, even
Yeah,
in Bush's era, would have been career ending for any politician. And we have shifted so far into this like terror state
yeah,
that we're just chalking that up to locker room talk. Yeah, absolutely. I and that's an interesting point. You know, you have this foundation, right? Yeah, a Cuban father, um, and a politically active mother, and I came from, I'll just be honest, a very rich white family, very opposite
mhm,
end of that. With I've spoken about this before with others, but my dad actually upheld conservative values as a person. So it was a very
mhm,
hard concept for me when I broke into the real world, right? When you start interacting with real people and realize that just because my dad upheld these, like, he believed in community and giving back and in integrity, and he gave, he did profit sharing at the business that he owned, so his employees got money back. That kind of stuff wasn't very common once you got outside of his bubble,
mhm.
and a lot of that. And uh, it was a hard transition. And one of the things, this is a preamble too, because I think this has been something kind of culturally in the last few years, that we're seeing a lot of people that are actually they're being forced to reconcile their ideology with the way the world actually is. We cannot avoid it. And
Yeah. What do you mean by that?
well, I think, when I was a kid, the Watch riots happened. Rodney King was a thing, but that was to American consciousness an isolated event. And then we got the Columbine school shootings, which was probably more when you were younger. I was a little bit older when that happened. And I think, but even with the school shootings, we got this idea that this is an isolated event. And
Mhm.
now, with the rise of social media, so many social media platforms, and instant streaming and video, like, we're getting police brutality on film every single day. We are getting, the evidence of kids going into schools and shooting people, and the cops standing there, and something that could have been propagandized before, right? Controlled.
Right.
the Uvalde shooter, right? We saw those parents talking to them and like, you're not letting your kids in. We're not letting you in to see your kids while there's an active shooter in there. But the cops also weren't doing anything. So it's kind of hard when
Mhm.
it's 24/7 for the and I would say you and I exist, probably you more than I, and even beyond you, there's more of that in a stratosphere of the internet that lives in that stuff, right? We see it every single day. But I
Right.
think for the average American, that stuff is really starting to be something they just cannot escape. Uh, and they have to confront it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so one of the things that I guess that's a preamble to another thing here is one of the things I've always appreciated about you is that there's a lot of leftist thought, right, that it's not our job to educate other people. And I agree with that, right, about the emotional burden of this. People might not have it. But something I've always appreciated about you is that you have always been willing to engage with me when you had the bandwidth. And if you didn't, you told me, and that was fine. But you've helped me by letting me ask questions and answer them. And I think sometimes we, especially white guys like me, that in this world, right, we come at this from the ivory tower approach. And something I've appreciated about you is you just talk to me like a person and help me. Like, I would ask questions and you go, hey, this is why, without judgment. And how do you think, like, I think that's a better path forward for us as a group, right? Is honest engagement. And I know that's not easy for everybody and it's not everybody's job, but kind of how did you, I see you do that for a lot of people. I see it on the internet. You engage with people, you answer questions, you're vulnerable. Like, what kind of brought you into this place where you felt willing to take on this burden of being an educator, I guess a cultural educator? What do you think drives that for you?
Yeah. So, sorry. I
You're good.
think a little bit of what I was saying before about like community empowerment and self-empowerment. For me, what I found as like everyone has their strengths, and I'm very like about strength-based leadership,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
like people are good at things and we should highlight that. And instead of, because I think a lot of, especially like in corporate world, it's like, oh, these are your weaknesses, you need to get better at them.
Yeah.
Um, but instead, I think we should look at our strengths and be like, oh, that's we let's lean on that a little.
I I was recently, the personality test was something I was, recently reading about, because it's
Mhm.
always something that's frustrated me at work is we reduce people down to a personality type, right?
Yeah,
And one of the things that I was saying in that was, hey, we should be hiring, if we're going to be hiring, right, for the right needs, not the perfect needs, right? Like
yeah,
people aren't going to check every box. And
of course.
I think that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions about basically leftist thought is that we don't want people to work. It's not that. It's that we want people to be able to contribute what they can contribute, right?
Right, right. And like, why would I work a shitty wage job that I'm bad at instead of like
Yeah.
I'm good at finding invasive species and doing that. Like I
Yeah.
could be using that for like ecological good, but instead I'm working for a wage,
Well, well,
you know?
we don't want ecological good in this country, right?
Right, right,
That's that's
right,
that's bad thought. We need bad things to happen.
right. And it's funny when there's a I don't know if it's a saying, but of when there's no like when employment rates are low,
mhm,
it's not that there's no jobs. We see jobs that are needed everywhere, you know,
yeah,
potholes need filling, uh, people are sick, whatever. It's just that you can't exploit certain jobs.
yeah.
So like,
That
yeah.
is
Anyway,
something.
yeah.
What in that regard? I know unions aren't unions effectively are a function of capitalism, right? I think that's something a lot of people don't understand. But what are your thoughts, kind of like on what's going on with Starbucks right now? Have you been following that? Like they're doing a nationwide strike. Like, do you think this is a sign that we are shifting back to more being worker focused, or do you think this is just kind of a blip in the radar?
Yeah, it's hard for me to tell. Um, I think I think it's promising.
Yeah,
And a lot of people are getting a lot of good organizing experience. So I'm hoping that this, when we think about radical thought, it's that we are organizing for 40 years in the future.
yeah,
We're more,
yeah.
we probably won't see the fruits of our own labor.
We're planting trees, right? Like
Right.
we're never gonna see them.
And
Um,
sometimes we have to adjust the soil first before a tree can even be planted. There's a lot of things that go into creating the future that we need and deserve. And I
yeah,
feel like things like small union strikes um, is indicative of people organizing their workplaces, which is a good thing. No
yeah,
matter where you, no
yeah,
matter where you are, I think organizing your workplace is the only way to get dignity in a workplace, or at
yeah.
least like a semblance of dignity.
Yeah, one of the things I found very interesting, and I'd like your thoughts on this, is I think a lot of times we deal so much in absolutes on political issues, right? We need to be better than this, that we can't even begin. Like you were touching on this earlier, right? With the way the Tea Party worked, like Bush came into power, then the Tea Party came into power. The way that the right has pulled this over has been in bits and pieces, and I think a lot of leftist thought is we gotta you know Elizabeth Warren isn't good enough, Bernie Sanders isn't good enough, and I'm like, yeah, right, they're not, but they're also better than where we are. And we you get into this kind of eating our own on progress, because I think you and I would both agree Bernie's probably like a little left of center globally, right? Not he's not, but for American politics, that's like a radical thinker, right? And it's
Right.
like, so what would your idea? How do you envision us kind of pushing this forward? And do you think, like, basically tilling the soil, right? Getting the fertilizer there so we can plant these trees, so we could have universal health care and, a minimum, like a living wage for all people, and so that people are able to have housing and food. Like, what's your ideas on that? How do you see us making that a reality?
Yeah, so that's the big question, right? Integral progress or like wins within a system that is ultimately meant to kill us.
Hmm.
It's hard. I don't have an answer for it. I
That's
think
okay.
that yeah, I think that like especially like working in policy in because my background, I don't know if you knew this, my background like professionally is in environmental policy.
Oh, I did not know that. And
Yeah. So working in the environmental world, we have a timeline where we need to make progress. And I've seen it again and again within these systems that, for example, I was working for a anti-litter campaign, basically.
hmm,
And where's funds in the police? So what they did is basically form a litter police. Um, you know, and it's meant, of course, I think there's good intentions meant to get people who are coming from out of town and dumping waste
yeah,
into residential neighborhoods. I get it. But then they're using these systems that are ultimately going to increase policing in Black and brown neighborhoods because those are already overexploited
yeah,
areas that
yeah,
people are like dumping their waste in. So like, is the over policing worth that incremental gain,
yeah.
Um,
That's a real thought. Like, that's a real hard line, right?
yeah, and I would say no. I mean, I would personally say no.
Yeah.
Um,
That's something I think there's a lot of this that I think is scary for people in the world, and that's part of conversations like this. I think hopefully we can get more people just even hearing, like, the idea of defunding the police seems so scary to people until when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said that you already see what defunded police looks like when you look at gated off communities there's no police in those places. They're like,
Yeah.
there's no police there. They might have a security guard, but there's no police in there. There's nobody coming by doing drive bys and checking in on things. They're self-policing. Um, what
Hmm.
what have you found to be an effective way to, because touching back kind of like I said about you being an educator and having these conversations, what have you found a good way to get people to kind of come to terms with the reality of the world? Like how do we bring people into this without them getting scared, getting overrun by, oh man, this is like, what do you mean a world without police? What do you mean like I can just quit my job and still have health care? Like how do we get people to see this? What have you found to be effective?
Yeah, I think oh, what I was saying before also about like making a full circle of I found that I have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So I like to get people's questions, be like, oh yeah, yeah, I've asked this one already. Like
Yeah.
this is what I found out.
Yeah.
And I think that asking those questions are super important. Like what does a world without police look like? What does justice look like? Um, I think that there's a phrase going around lately called deep canvassing.
Mm-hmm.
Basically
I've
like,
not heard that, so I'm curious.
yeah, I've only vaguely heard it, but it's basically the concept of instead of organizing target groups, like going into a neighborhood and canvassing, it's talking to everyone you know and trying to, as a community, answer questions, these big questions. And I like it better because I feel like a lot of activism gets on like a savior kind of route. Um, but yeah, I think liberation really just means talking to everyone, to your
Yeah.
community, to people you know, and being like, what do we need? And
Yeah.
then people have different answers, because
Yeah.
we have different lived experiences, which again is also like dependent on who's in your community,
Yeah.
if it's um, but yeah, I think I don't want to say that the left is more intolerant than like the right when it comes to like, like if I was
Uh,
gonna say like
but I
what
know
how
what you mean. I like
Mhm.
we draw artificial lines in the sand a lot. We don't let
Yeah.
people come into it. Whereas, I mean, right wing pamphlets are those, little pamphlets with 10 bullet points about why you should, and they they
Well,
they they work you into it is what I've seen. It's more of a long-term process, I think.
yeah. And it's hard for me to talk about like the alt-right pipeline because
Yeah.
I don't think that those pamphlets are targeted for me.
No,
Like
no, they're
as long
targeted
as
at
yeah,
me. Yeah, definitely.
right. So it's like what I mean, I don't think that like I don't know.
And we also don't have to go down that route. That is a
No,
very,
no, I'm just thinking about it because it's
yeah.
like if and I've been seeing like a new resurrection of alt-right shit with Gen Z
Mm-hmm.
and Gen Alpha, honestly, that I'm like, oh God, are we doing this again?
It's gonna be there. There's always
Yeah.
those people that want to, manipulate this for their gain, regardless of the consequences.
Yeah. Um, but I think a lot of people are so, and this is talking about like left-leaning people, like
Yeah.
are so traumatized and desperate for feeling humanized that I think that we project our trauma onto each other. I don't
Yeah.
know if that makes
No, it
sense, but
does. It
like
does.
being like, I have been felt so unaccepted my entire life that as a protection, I can't accept someone else unless they've, you know, passed these tests.
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a shield, right? There's a lot of vulnerability that again, I don't think tolerant is the word. I agree, but I think the right is more accepting. They'll accept the of the person that they're recruiting. They'll accept your um the positions you have that are opposition and wear them down over. That's what I have seen with people is they,
Really?
red pilling essentially, right? Is yeah, here's a little bit of truth on this, but then they start, you know, they'll pull flawed statistics and bad reports and just build this argument that wears you down. And I think I think the common thread, just based off what I've seen, and please feel free to disagree, is both there's a vulnerability. They take advantage of insecure people that are feeling, neglected and abandoned and mistreated by society, that white anger that just like that
Yeah.
feels justified, and they just start feeding into why it's justified and start giving you, even if it's not true, even if we can just turn on TV or not TV but put on TikTok or Reddit or any of these social media platforms and see everything that they're telling you isn't true. They're speaking to your emotions. And I think I do see I don't know how we change that, because I do think we do have to have certain things that are lines in the sand too, right? Like we can't not tolerate hate speech. We cannot tolerate bigotry. But how do we get someone from bigotry to, hey, what you're saying is actually racist. What you're saying is actually homophobic, transphobic, misogynistic, whatever it is. I think that's a big hurdle we get, because I agree with you. I think you get you being a general, not you specific, you get wounded, right? And then someone hits you with something that triggers that, and there's a lot of trauma there. The left is definitely embracing personal trauma. I think in a way that the right doesn't. I guess that's where it is for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would disagree though. I think that there's still personal trauma that they're exploiting.
Yeah.
That you're saying about like people feeling abandoned.
Yeah.
But I think it's a different route instead of like and I think that it's important to acknowledge that we are all traumatized from these systems,
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. I I think I had something in my head when you said that um about personal trauma. Um I don't know what
Well,
I lost
no,
it.
I think the right, like, instead of understanding that trauma and being like, oh shit, this system's fucked
Yeah.
up, like we need to change the system, they're like, oh, they blame it on individuals or
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
minorities.
they
Or
weaponize
like,
it. They weaponize it.
right,
Yeah.
right. So instead of like processing it, and I don't know if anyone is very good at processing their trauma, but I think the right instead like pushes it down and is like,
Yeah.
yeah, these fucking bitches won't sleep
Yeah.
with me. Instead of
They
like, maybe
fester.
you're a
Yeah.
horrible person.
Yeah, they let it fester, and they create
Yeah.
like these. I mean, we're seeing it all the time, right? We see it in these white supremacists out here enacting
Hmm.
violence in this state sanctioned, and people don't want to see that. I think that's one of the things I found interesting is I agree with you. I think community, that's how we process trauma, right? It's together.
Yeah.
We talk through it. We address we challenge each other. We hold each other accountable.
Yeah.
And I know what it was. I think that the funniest thing is when we were, talking about radical thought, radical thought is always assigned to leftist ideology, like like in the news and in conversation. But it's like we don't sit here and talk about this white supremacist being radical thought too. It's just negative. It's extreme. Like why aren't we not talking about
Right.
this is that's radicalism too. It's a radical thought because it's outside of the cultural consciousness. But
Right.
we as a society are endorsing that radical thought while saying this is not legitimate radical thought. And I'm like, I don't know how I feel about
Yeah. And
that.
I think it's, I think it's because the systems reinforce that that is what should, we live in a like white supremacist
Yeah,
patriarchal
yeah,
existence. So anytime that people are inhibiting that behavior, it's like, that's normal. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
fine.
yeah.
Because we have these huge apparatuses that back up that thought, you know?
It's funny. I think that's one of those things where just tying all that together, right? Is when you watch movies, the police are the good guys and the military are the good guys, or we reinforce friend zone in television shows, and we reinforce all these little things that are even in the reality, like or the standoffs where or stand like the standalones where like yeah men are abused by women, like those
Yeah.
things do happen, and
It's,
we create, but we say like this is why aren't we talking about violence against women? I know this is all very boilerplate for in the world we exist in, right? We talk about this, but I think a lot of people don't realize how much is just in media, in the news, and in conversations. Cultural is uh yeah, misogyny is normal, racism is normal, like uh and I do hope, like one of the things I will before we move into our top 10, because that's going to come up now, I will ask you, do you think I personally do this, I believe this, so I'm asking you, do you think technology has made it so that we are like we are getting better. People are seeing this stuff in real time, and it's getting better. Or do you think that's right? Do you see a bright future because of the interconnectivity of the world? Or do you think the alpha and the Gen Z right wing is gonna assert dominance? Like, where do you see us going in the next 5 years, 10 years on this?
um, that's definitely a hard question and one I don't want. Like, if my honest opinion, I
Yeah.
think we're gonna go full fascism. I mean, I think we're already there,
I
TBH,
mean,
but like,
yeah, I can't
like,
argue. It's hard to argue that. uh,
okay, so if I'm getting into like my political mind, like, in order, like, they say that uh fascism is capitalism in decay,
yeah,
so like without building structures of liberation, without building, and I think a lot of people think of like being on the left, being a revolutionary as taking down structures, which is part of it, but it's also building up alternatives that we can rely on, um, so that when capitalism falls, we don't have nothing. And we've
yeah,
seen in places where there are no structures, like after Katrina, we saw that a bunch of white supremacists were going around
yeah,
killing people,
yeah,
taking an opportunity in a really horrible moment to do that. And I think that's kind of what we see throughout history is like these moments of like, this is the blueprint that white supremacists build up, allow for that to take power when there are no structures. So I think that part of what we need to do is build alternative structures so that we can survive, um, and our and that we can survive the fall of capitalism.
yeah,
Um, and I don't think we're there yet. So that's kind of scary to me. I think that there's a lot of things in the US specifically that, a lot of like, not pacifism, but like almost like wasp thought, I want
hmm
to call
yeah,
it, where
yeah,
it's like, and then also transgresses into racism of being
yeah,
like, oh, like, no, we have to do things very peacefully. And this
yeah.
reminds me of, I was cringing so hard. So when I was in Barcelona, I went to a Extinction Rebellion meeting. I don't know if you're familiar with that group, but
I am not.
um,
I will look into them though,
yeah. So, well,
or maybe I
it,
should.
yeah, I'll give you some tea on
Bullet
it.
points.
So it's a um environmental group that does like protesting against the climate catastrophe. And they're known for being more militant on that side and like really getting out there and like
Yeah.
blocking traffic as if that's militant, but whatever. And I think it started in the UK, but there's branches like around the world. And when I was in Barcelona, I went to the Barcelona branch. And there was an example of what the British branch was doing, which was that they were going to paint their hands red, print it on a government building that was responsible for whatever climate change thing that was going on. And then they were going to turn themselves into the cops. And I was like, hold on. Why don't you just do the first part?
Yeah.
Why are you doing the second
Yeah.
part?
Don't do that.
And it was funny because it's just like everyone's like, yeah, that's the right thing to do,
Yeah.
which I feel like we have this culture of like, it was a very like moment where I was like, oh my God, the British are fucking nuts.
Yeah. Yeah. I encounter that in my day-to-day life all the time of wasp thought of we think of things as an individual basis and not a cultural basis or a systemic basis. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'm
And
not
very
racist. I'm not
right,
racist. I can't be racist. I have black friends. I mean, I know that's
right.
uh
And like part of that I think is like the culture of niceness. I've been
yeah.
hearing a lot of like valuing niceness over kindness.
Hmm.
So it's like when you are so involved in avoiding conflict, avoiding feeling like you're viewed as not nice or whatever. I
Oh,
think that
let me pause this right here. I got to take a quick break. Come here. You can do it. You can fit. Come here. Come here. All right. So I wanted to pick back up. One of the things you said, we'll talk about for a minute, and then we'll talk about our top 10 favorite cereals. Is kindness versus niceness. And like what does that mean? Because I know I have an understanding of that, but how would you define that?
yeah, I would define that as like valuing politeness, valuing these like WASP social norms of like not like avoiding conflict,
Hmm.
very passive and like not emotionally fronted communication over like actually understanding another person and trying to like come to a solution.
Yeah.
And I see this a lot like, it like shows itself a lot when people are like, and thinking it's always like about how, especially like Black women are aggressive when really they're just advocating for themselves.
Yes.
But like, especially a white person would never have to advocate for themselves in that way.
Never.
So it's like,
I'm a straight white guy. I never have to do anything. Like the world is catered to me. And I mean, I know it's easy for me to say that, but it's true. I'm able to like I just quit my job and I'm not working for a year. That's
that's awesome.
yeah, it
Fuck yeah.
is, but also what an immense privilege, right? Like there's a lot
Yeah.
of people that the idea of quitting your job is life ruining. And I mean, you said a black woman, advocating for themselves, but what the hardest person to be in America is a black woman, right? I imagine it's a black trans person would probably be actually the
Like
lowest.
you can go down
Yeah,
every,
yeah, rabbit hole, but
yeah.
statistically, with based off of data, the hardest thing is to be a black woman. And when I saw that, 10 or 15 years ago, it was just earth shattering to me. Like, oh God, I can't. I think the other thing is one of the things that just blows my or is such a frustration for me is the idea that we put ourselves in someone else's shoes and as if that's empathy. And I'm like, I can't put myself in the shoes of a black woman.
Yeah, me
The
either.
the barriers between me and my black friends who I love and care for, and I think that's kind of, this idea that I understand what you're going through. It's like, how could I? I can't.
Right.
I don't exist in that world. I cannot. I can see it. I can understand it like objectively, but I cannot. And that also kind of ties when you said that. Sorry, it just kind of fired the synapses in my brain a little bit there. But I agree. Like, we have got to move past nice and start being kind. Like, give people
And I think,
graciousness. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, yeah. And I think part of that is like, everyone has to advocate for their own needs.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is just because we live in different experiences
Yeah.
and need different things. But I think it's also part of like us to learn to listen to other people's needs and understand that like, I mean, of course, like I get this way too. Like it feels personal when you hear someone you care about say that their needs aren't getting met,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's like, oh shit, like that, you know, that sucks.
Yeah.
But
It does. Oh, what the world is happening there? Okay. Sorry,
yeah,
had
and
a
I
pop up. Go
very
ahead.
good.
Um,
Yeah, I think that like until we can have conversations that feel like conflict, I don't, and this is also like the whole respectability process. Like I actually don't think that Black people in the United States need approval or like understanding from white people in the
no,
United States. I
no.
don't. Like, and I mean, this is also just like as someone whose family's like recently come here, So it's
Yeah.
like interesting seeing this being like, oh wow, there's a lot of crazy shit going on with that.
Yeah.
Just like such a intense history of like horrible racial dynamics, honestly. I mean, that's around the world, of course, but like
Yeah.
it's intense. I don't know.
It is. I think it's I would say Americans almost wear it as a badge of honor. Like, not, I don't think individually, but culturally, like, we don't hide the fact that imprisoning black people, and we are imprisoned. I mean, our imprisonment rates far outstrip everybody, and it's predominantly black and brown people, and we shoot. I mean, uh, kind of conflating that, but the guy who said when the gun control argument was lost when we realized Republicans were okay with kids being shot. And I know gun
Yeah.
control is a very loaded thing, and also racially motivated historically as well. Uh, but
Nice pun.
yeah,
You
but
said it. The gun issue is a loaded topic.
yeah,
But
oh, boo, oh man, got him. But it's the same thing. Like, we just see cops killing black people every day. Like, it's traumatizing for us, far more for the people that have to live that life. And that's the thing. I like, to your point, I just have to accept if somebody tells me something, it's not, they don't need my endorsement, right? They don't. It's just, that's your life. Fuck, that sucks. Like,
yeah,
ugh. I'm sorry, and not that I owe them. I mean, you know what I mean. I can't
yeah,
apologize to them for the world that we exist in, but the same side of that is, you're right. We can't even begin to start any of this, fixing this, until we start getting into reparations and like laying a
yeah,
foundation where people are people. We can't talk about equality when I have like generations of legs up just by the nature of the country I live in. Right? Uh
yeah. And I think that part of the conversation is like, how do we let, especially if, when we gain advantages from the system, like how do we destroy a system that benefits us, you know?
yeah.
And I think we need to actually like make a commitment to that of
Yeah.
like, and a lot of times it's not like my life's gonna get worse, you
No.
know? And even so, like if that allows for the betterment of everyone,
Then it's
like
worth it.
Yeah. And people like to talk about like the fucking trolley question of like one person
Yeah.
versus everyone on earth.
Yeah.
But it's like when that comes in reality, I still think we have this individualistic idea of existence. And I think that also comes from a place of being in a system where we have to think just for ourselves. Like no one else has our back. The systems don't have our back,
No.
whatever.
Yeah. We're all in it together, right? At the end of the day, even our enemies are in this with us. Like, even if they don't want to admit it, even if we don't want to admit it, we're all,
Yeah.
the only
And
way forward is together.
yeah, I see it a lot with climate change where it's just like, we're really just gonna let humanity die out like this. We're just gonna do that. And I feel like they're kind of stubborn enough where it might be true.
Yeah,
So
you're not wrong.
yeah. So
All right. Well, let's change gears
okay,
drastically.
yeah.
Um, and talk about something. Actually, this is great because I love cereal. So we're going to talk about our top 10 cereals. And I got this information about an hour ago, so I have not really had time to think about this. So this is off the top of
It
my
comes
head.
from the heart.
It
Yeah.
is. It is. I mean, that's where cereal should be, right?
Right.
So let's start us off. What is your number 10 cereal?
Number 10 for
Yeah.
me, I feel like something that gets a lot of love is Cinnamon Toast Crunch. And it's up there for
Yeah.
me, but it's not my top. Well, maybe it's like 6. So
Oh,
10. Hmm. How about maybe Fruity Pebbles?
oh, good one. Good one.
Yeah.
I love it. The drink, I am vegetarian, not vegan, so I still do regular milk, but drinking the milk afterwards with that has always been the
Hmm.
uh
And that's the second part of the cereal experience, I feel like.
yes.
It's like how good does it make the milk taste?
Yes, absolutely. Well, you said actually mine. So I don't like this cereal. This full disclosure, but it is my wife's favorite cereal. So I would be remiss if I didn't say Cinnamon Toast Crunch. So that's going to be my number 10 just for her because it brings her joy. She will open up a bag of it and just start like handfuls. And
Mm.
I'm like, God bless you.
Yeah, it's like I can see the appeal of it, but it's not for me. But I would
Uh,
eat it. If
yeah,
I was like, I would be, if I was on a desert island, all I had was Cinnamon Toast Crunch, I'd be like, all right, whatever.
yeah. Fair enough.
You
Fair
know?
enough. All right. All right. So what's your number 9 cereal?
Okay. I feel like maybe I'll give the bottom 5-ish,
Okay. Yeah,
depending
there it is.
on
That's fine.
location.
Well,
Yeah,
rankings are subject to change. That's what we'll throw out. This is as of right
right.
now. These are the
Because
bottom.
I feel like it depends. Yeah, the top 5 are like I would go for these at
Yeah,
any time,
absolutely. Absolutely.
and the bottom 5 of the top 10, I feel like are like I would eat them, but I
Yeah.
wouldn't like I'm not actively craving them.
Yes, fair enough. I'm with you. I'm with you.
Yeah, so I feel like Fruity Pebbles, um, the Co- Cocoa Puffs, they're pretty good, but
All
you
right.
know,
Yeah, all right. Mine is Apple Jacks. My number 9 is Apple Jacks.
I don't think I've ever had Apple Jacks before. I
I
remember the commercials, but
they're essentially one flavor of Fruit Loops, which apparently Fruit Loops are all the same flavor. I
what?
I know. I don't know if that's true or not, but I've been told that, and I can't wrap my around that either. But Apple Jacks is like apple cinnamon,
Mhm.
and not always, but sometimes you just want that. Sometimes you just want that. So that's my number 9 is.
You just blew my eye with the Fruit Loops
I could be
thing.
wrong. I am open to being wrong, and I'll
'Cause
have
I
to
think
fact check myself.
Fruit
Uh,
Loops is like in the top 5, I think, for
oh,
me.
all right, all right. What it might spoiler alert, maybe for me too. All right. So what's next in your bottom 5?
Bottom 5, I would say um Cheerios, but like the non honey nut ones.
Just
Just like
plain
Cheerios.
Cheerios.
I'm
All
like,
right. All right.
same with Raisin Bran. I'm like,
Oh man. All right. All right. Um, well, I'm gonna that might show up later in mine. I have feelings about Cheerios. But for me, those Honey Smacks would be my number. I guess we're on 8. Honey Smacks
oh.
with the frog. That's
Mm-hmm.
always it's a little sugary for me, which I mean it's cereal, so of course it is. But sometimes I want that sugar smack, so, that kind of smack.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, all right. So what is your? I think we're on 7 now, or your. We've had. Wait, let me recap. I'm normally better at this. You've had fruity pebbles. You've had plain Cheerios. You had one other one. What am I missing?
Raisin Bran. Just
Raisin
plain
bran.
Raisin Bran.
Raisin bran. All right. So what's next for you?
I feel like all of those like health cereals.
Like
I don't know how else to describe them,
Special
but like
K and bran.
no, I'm talking about like the shit you get at like Trader Joe's or Whole
Oh, okay.
Foods that are
Yeah.
like less sugary versions of, and there's
Oh, yeah. All
fiber.
right. When you
That
wanna think you're taking care of yourself by eting.
right, right. Like I'll eat it,
All
but I'm gonna
right.
be like, damn, this could really use some more sugar.
Yeah. Oh. All right. All right. Fair enough. I'm uh I'm gonna go with actually Raisin Bran as well. So for my next, I like Raisin Bran a lot actually. But it doesn't quite crack my in my top 5. So that's my number 7. I think is where we're at. So we got one more for the bottom 5. So what's your?
Special K, I
All
think
right, there you go.
that's Special K. Yeah, yeah.
Or actually, yeah. All right. So um, and then for me, I don't like Special K. I don't like any of that stuff. I'm gonna go with Lucky Charms, not because I
Oh
don't love
shit.
Lucky Charms, but because they have gelatin in the mushrooms in the marshmallows, so I can't eat it anymore. So it is out of mine. So let's we've totally thrown numbers out the roll, but let's go with 5 more. What are your top 5
I'm gonna do
cereals?
Lucky Charms for 5 for me.
All right, all
That's just
right.
pretty good. But like, yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
what? Yeah, what like? Do you still partake in Lucky Charms? Is that a uh
So I'm not even vegan
oh,
anymore.
all right, fair enough. That's okay.
Yeah.
Like a different conversation for a different time, but people who get militant about that too, it's just like people got to make the decisions that are right for them and the place they're in and make
Right.
I,
So actually, if you don't mind gross talk, I got really bad food poisoning when I was vegan from a salad bar.
oh no.
Like so bad food poisoning that I had to go to the hospital to
Oh
like
no.
rehydrate and like I stopped being like I got IBS from
Oh
poisoning.
no. That breaks my heart for so
Yeah,
many
so
reasons.
I literally can't eat so many vegetables. I can't eat mushrooms. I can't eat legumes.
Oh
I can't
wow.
eat any brassica, so like broccoli, cabbage, kale, like all that family, Brussels sprouts, can't eat that. So I had to eat meat, and I was like, I literally don't have anything. I can, like, what am I
Yeah,
supposed to
no,
do?
again, like that's why we
I'm
can't
like,
ever judge somebody for the choices they're making because
right,
we don't know the reason they're making the choice. Like I,
right.
I had a hard time with that before. I'll be honest, I used to be one of those like, why are you vegetarian? And then
Yeah.
as soon as I became vegetarian, I was like, man, I was such a like, what was I doing? Oh, those poor
I
people.
was a jerk too about that shit. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah. Um,
yeah.
well, Lucky Charms is a great one. I am gonna go with um, corn pops. I
Oh,
love corn pops. That is my
okay.
sugary. sugary of choice. I like honey a lot, in case you haven't noticed. So, all right. So, what's your number four?
I think Fruit Loops.
That's a good choice. That I will spoiler alert, Fruit Loops is also my number four. Just
Hell yeah.
yeah, like that's for me. The milk after that is second to my number three choice. So
What's your third?
I'll go with my number three. That's Cocoa Pebbles. The chocolate milk after
Sure.
Cocoa Pebbles is one of my favorite. Like that's like perfect chocolate
Yes.
milk. Uh,
Yes. So my third is actually, so when I wasn't, okay, my mom's from Barcelona, right?
yeah,
And I would go there for summer sometimes with my grandma. And they don't, they basically don't have any, they have some sugary cereals, but
yeah,
like not like the US, because I think they
yeah.
just like don't follow the regulations. But
My wife lived in Spain for a little while, and one of her favorite stories is they call them cornflakes instead of cornflakes.
yeah.
Uh,
Um, but there's a cereal called I think it's called like Cocoa Peaks or something.
uh-huh.
But it's basically, imagine a Cocoa Puff, but if it was disc shaped.
All right, I would love it.
It's so good. Something about the shape, that it not being a sphere, but like
Yeah,
flat. So
huh?
good.
All right,
Like very good texture.
now I have something I have to try when we go to Spain. So she lived in
Yeah.
southern Spain,
Okay.
but um, and I know you lived in Spain for a little while, right? Pre or at the start of the pandemic, you were still in Spain, right?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That was an experience. That
Yeah.
was an
What
experience.
a I bet that feels like a different lifetime too.
It did. I felt like I was in, weirdly enough, like the future, because the pandemic hit there like 2 weeks before it hit the US.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, my friend actually was like, because I think they knew some friends in China that were like, like this is happening, and told me, and I was like, whatever. And then it was happening to me, and I was like, oh my God, people in the US,
Yeah.
and
Like
everyone's like, whatever. Anyway, yeah,
yeah.
it was funny.
That's our definitely we thought we had our generational trauma in 9/11 and we did, but man, we we raised the stakes real hardcore on
It
that one.
outdid itself once again.
Okay, what's your number two?
Okay, my number two. Okay, you know what? I think instead of one of the health foods, it would be honey bunches of oats in my
Oh, good
my
one. Good one.
in my bottom five, but
All
still
right.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. My number two is Honey Nut Cheerios.
All right. All right. I
Just
love
like something about it is like, I think it just reminds me of my childhood.
I love Honey Nut Cheerios. But it will not be in my top 10. I know that's shocking. My number two is Raisin Bran Crunch, or any of those like any of those types of things. I love raisins. And so that's
I
my
might have a recommendation for you,
oh yeah,
because my
hit me.
my top one is Raisin Nut Bran.
Oh, I love Raisin Nut Bran as well.
Yes!
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yes!
But this is this was on your list, and people are gonna razz me for it, and I don't care. My favorite cereal is just Cheerios. I just love plain Cheerios because they're not too
Mm.
sugary, and they are good. Like you can use them in Chex Mix, which I love. Like Chex Mix gets an honorable mention, or Chex because I love Chex Mix. But the cereal
Mhm.
itself kind of sucks. Like
Oh my God, I forgot about Frosted Mini Wheats. I love that
oh,
shit.
that's yeah. We
That's
could
in my top 10 for
yeah.
sure.
Our
I'm
top
pushing all of those health cereals down
yes,
and
yeah,
putting
get
those
rid of them.
in.
No, I know because the sugary is great. I also love
Mhm.
that. I mean, the problem is, well, now like now my brain is spiraling through all the wonderful cereals, but Cheerios is my number one, and uh, Raisin Nut Bran. I would tie in with Raisin Bran Crunch. Any of those like whatever they
Mm.
put around the raisins, like slightly breaded raisins with shit and cereal is like
I've never tried the crunch one. I might have to do that.
you'll have to do it and get back to me and eventually
Okay.
I will wrap this up and say you also have to watch Gravity Falls at some point. I know I've harassed you about that. The Disney show. One day you need to watch that show. I think you'll love it.
Okay. It's
Um,
on Disney Plus
it
or
is. It is. It is
I'll see what's
fantastic.
on that.
So it's only 40 episodes and it's an animated show. It's a kids show, but
Only 40 okay, that's fine.
yeah,
I've made it through some of
I
One
know.
Piece. I've
Yeah.
watched One Piece before.
Oh my
So
god. No, I'm intimidated by One Piece and Bleach and Naruto and any of those things that are like a lifetime
that
worth commitment. I just
literally got me through college. All of those like shonen that
yeah.
like are 1,000 episodes long. Yeah.
I
I was
started.
like disassociating through my life for 4 years. So I was like, okay.
I think that's more common than we admit at that period in our lives. Is I think there's a lot of that happens through college. But Dolores, thank you so much. I had a really great time. I
Yeah,
appreciate.
this was really fun.
Yeah, and I'll put it. I'll put it up on YouTube soon. And if you know, if you ever want to do it again, let me know. We can if there's something you're like, hey, I want to talk about this. It's just fun for me to get to share kind of we got a lot of cool and interesting people in our lives and to get to just talk and
Yeah.
put it out there. So thank you again. And I'll talk to you on the internet.
Yeah, it's so sweet that you thought of me.
Oh
Literally
yeah,
like
no,
warms
you've
my heart.
been very helpful in me and my journey to being a better person. And I think that's the other side of it too, right? Is it's a journey. That's the part I think
Yeah.
we lose sight of too much in this is
Yeah.
we can be better people, but it takes a lot.
Yeah. And takes communal work.
It does. It does. It's not just you, right? I've had my wife and my family and my friends and just and strangers. Honestly, you never know when somebody's going to say something that's like, oh, shoot, I never thought of that.
Right. Yeah.
Hopefully we put a kernel out there for somebody else to make the world a better place. And I'll talk to you soon. And let me know when you try the Raisin Bran crunch. Let me know what you think.
And what was the show again?
Gravity Falls.
Gravity Falls.
I will
Okay.
blow you up about it continuously. Don't
Okay.
worry. So
Okay, good. Because I have like memory problems. So like
don't worry about it.
keep
Don't worry
reminding
about it.
me and I will eventually.
I will. All right. I'll talk to you soon. Have a great day.
Okay.
Dipper. Show him how it's done. Come here, buddy.